There's just, for me, nothing more beautiful and exquisitely painful than the sound of those close harmonies. And that's what jazz is built on, right? Is the voicings and the harmonies and the endless surprise and invention in those chords.
I now and then arrange a piece in a jazz style, but I wouldn't consider myself a jazz writer. But in every single one of my pieces, I'm analyzing chords, and when I want to make it a little more interesting, a little more challenging, a little more tasty, I draw on those upper extensions of chords, which I learned in jazz.
When I grew up as a kid, there really was no distinction between classical playing and jazz playing and gospel and folk playing, because my teacher wanted me to be versed in all of these traditions.
We need jazz in the classroom, and yes, if I can do it, you can do it too. We're going to find ways to do it together, but it's just too valuable for children not to have.
In the world that I work in now, string players that I come with, I work with a lot of players in the Indianapolis Symphony, for example. 1 minute we're recording Bach, we're recording Beethoven, we're recording these amazing classical composers and Baroque composers. The next thing, we're doing jazz. They've got to be able to be versatile on that. And then next thing I know, I've got a piece that uses an improvisational violin solo. Somebody's got to be able to do it. And those are the people that get the callbacks. And so it really shows the versatility that people need. And so when I incorporate that into my music, I think it's kind of preparing kids for what lies ahead.
Jazz is a uniquely American music that is rooted in lots of traditions. It's a melting pot of traditions that's been morphing and shaping over the years in different parts of the country.
Well, I know I'm a better musician because of being surrounded by and exposed to all the phenomenal jazz musicians that I know, that I have known, and who are friends of mine who continue to rehearse at my house.
I have no formal training whatsoever in jazz, nothing. So all I know is what I hear. But I have this, there's a certain gravity that cluster chords have for me, that no matter how I try to escape them, I sort of get pulled into those close, tight harmonies.
I was influenced by jazz and didn't know it as I was growing up because I didn't know what it was. And I found out later when I was listening to different music, like, oh, that's jazz. And I would listen to the piano player playing all those chords, and that was one thing I had not learned in my piano lessons, was just playing chords. I played off the music, you know.
Many of my arrangements employ jazz voicings, jazz harmonies, especially in the piano part.
As a composer, I'm constantly looking for little gems that I can put in my pocket and say, oh, well, that chord, I'll use that later. That's going to come in handy one day.
Jazz has had a very profound influence on me as a musician. What it did for me was it opened up the whole new world of listening, of really listening to music. And I really believe that it was a profound influence on me as a composer, because when you're listening to jazz, you're listening to the changes in the piece, and you're listening to them improvise. I can't help but think that didn't have some influence on me as a composer.
Jazz is a set of rules, like a game, and especially if you introduce it to kids that way. Here's a set of rules, and within these set of rules, you get to play. And a key part of that is listening to each other.
My dad, who is an international jazz musician, Stanley Jordan, known all over the world for sort of revolutionizing the way that you can play the guitar. He plays the guitar as a piano, which introduces a whole nother level of possibilities on the instrument. And he's a very expressive player.
For me, it was my experience in college vocal jazz group under the direction of Dave Riley, who was a fantastic jazz educator. Those years of studying that music actually takes my own writing a different direction.
Fell in love with Manhattan Transfer. And so my education got even more involved in the New York Voices. I got involved, with them and hearing all that great vocal jazz. So, and then you surround your people, you know, Marilyn Lightfoot, her husband's a jazz trumpet player, you know, and they're family to me.
I've been very fortunate to be married to a professional jazz trumpet player, a very, very fine musician. As we say in our family, I always say, I can't carry Jack's folder. You know, he's such a phenomenal musician.
One of the big things that he constantly encouraged me to do when I was younger was to explore my own unique sound and my own angle on the music.
This was a whole nother world that opened up to me when I began dating Jack, and then we've been married now for right at 40 years. But I will say that jazz has had a very profound influence on me as a musician.
And just driving and jamming out to the jazz station, and my dad would go, you know, hey, scat to this, you know, just whatever you want. And my first reaction was, no. I didn't feel open to it at first, and I remember feeling really nervous, and my heart was beating. It was just me and my dad in the car, you know. But I remember feeling that fear, and then going like, okay, da 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 da, you know, and kind of like just. He was like, yeah, just like one note, or like find a note that just kind of you can just sit on the one note, and it just kind of stays there, and then the music can move around you. And I'm like, okay, and just his enthusiastic encouragement, and I didn't do much that day.
Jazz music in particular has really resonated with me on so many levels because I find that the ability to improvise in the idiom, the ability to explore different vocal colors in the idiom have been very much a part of my teaching and a part of my writing that I have tried to communicate to the people that I serve.
When I incorporate things like jazz into my music, it's really important to me that I don't do it in a hokey way, in a overly commercial way, where here's a swing tune, ding, 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 and it's just kind of the swing tune. I like to incorporate it in a more contemporary way, almost setting jazz concepts in a more contemporary, fun way, but still, as I mentioned earlier, in a legit way.
I'm very, very grateful that I've had exposure to the jazz world. I'm mystified by it. I really am. I think most really great jazz musicians, they were geniuses.
You are creating an opportunity for children and yourself in the process to collaborate, to be creative, to use critical thinking skills, to be flexible and adaptable, to use productivity and accountability, because you're being accountable to each other in that group. If you've never heard those words before, I just described the heart of 21st century thinking skills. That's a big buzzword in the education circles. Jazz artists, jazz combos have been doing this since the beginning of time because that's the heart of jazz.